Okay, so hello everybody. Today I am going to be interviewing Colin Monroe. Colin is a entrepreneur. He owns his own immigration law firm in Stamford, Connecticut. The reason I am interviewing Colin is because I am an aspiring entrepreneur and I would like to get some information from someone who is experienced in entrepreneurship. So, Colin, Uh, my first question is, can you tell me a little bit about your business?
Hi, Alex. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I am, of course, an attorney, and so I do practice law. And well, over the years, I've become more specialized and primarily in practicing immigration law. There are basically two areas of immigration law that I work in. One is what we call business immigration law, and the other one is family. And other parts of the immigration practice involve court matters, which I do not deal with.
Okay. So what is it mostly that you do deal with then?
Well, my client base has been primarily multinational corporations, and they are often either U.S. based or they can be foreign based, but they are often in need of transferring people from outside the U.S. to the United States to work for their U.S. businesses, usually first on a temporary basis, and ultimately they often seek what we call lawful permanent residence, or what's commonly known as a green card for these individuals. So there are provisions in the U.S. law that permit companies to import people for this purpose, and there are also provisions which permit companies to sponsor their employees for a green card.
Okay. So so what made you want to do that and branch out on your own and start your own law firm?
Well, the motivation was primarily fear, I guess, because I had just lost a job,
Hmm.
and I was trying to figure out a way to make a living to support my children. And as I already was an attorney, so I knew what was involved in the practice of law, and it just happened that an opportunity arose when I was doing some work for a client, and I learned a little bit about immigration, and I learned that there were parts of it that were relatively straightforward. But long story short, I guess, is that I really had no idea what was involved, but I was highly motivated because I was looking for a way to make a good living. So I did have some expertise. Obviously, I knew the law, not in immigration law, but I knew how to find it. And I had sort of an automatic client base because this particular company that I was doing work for was a very large Fortune 500 company, and they had a need. So that's was the sort of the window of opportunity and I just took a chance and thought that, well, if I can figure out tax law, which what I was doing previously, then how difficult could it be to figure out immigration law? So I was blissfully ignorant
Hmm.
at the time of how complicated it really was.
So you mentioned that you mentioned difficulty. So
Yeah.
a question that I have is what is what were some of the difficulties that you faced in not just the work but actually running the business, having employees and making sure everyone was doing their jobs and things like that?
Yeah, that is a big part of the job. And when I first started, I had very minimal amount of work, and so I really didn't need any employees. But that quickly changed, And finding people who already had skills, for example, as immigration paralegals or immigration attorneys, was difficult, in part because at that time the economy was very vibrant, and so I had to train people.
Mm.
And so in order to train them, obviously I had to know enough about the law to train them, and I had been doing it for about 2 years before I really needed to hire someone other than just sort of a secretarial person. So I had to train people, and I had to figure out who were the best types of people to train as paralegals. I liked people primarily. I guess my first two paralegals were both women, but someone with a college education, someone who was bright, someone who had a strong work ethic, and who had a personality, to interact with clients, because there was a lot of client contact, and that's a very, very important part of the process when you're doing business immigration work. So, yeah, there are a lot of difficult parts to that. I was fortunate because the first person I hired to train as a paralegal was really smart and really motivated, and had, I guess, a sense of responsibility for the job.
So
part of that has, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, so you started out with 2 paralegals.
I started with one, and I trained her, and then once she was trained, I was able to hire another person whom I desperately needed, and I could train her in some things, and the other paralegal was helpful to her, training her as well. So it kind of grew that way internally.
So how many employees, as your company grew, how many more employees did you gain over the years?
Over a period of about 4 years, I think, I had 3 other attorneys working for me, and I had 4 paralegals, and I had 2 administrative people. So, it was almost about a dozen people almost who worked for me. So it was still a small business, but it was involved managing personnel and dealing with all the issues of payroll and employment taxes and maintaining good relationships with the client.
So actually, my next question was going to be, what are some of the skills? Well, what are the top 3 skills that you would say someone needs as a person to be able to run their own business? I know you mentioned dealing with client relations and managing your employees, but I mean not specifically to being an attorney, but just to running your own business in general.
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is that you really have to understand your product and the service that you're offering. And in my case, that means I really had to learn and understand immigration law. And I think that's what I've observed for most entrepreneurs, is that they have an appetite for risk, and they also, over the years of their work experience and education, they've become very, very technically knowledgeable about a particular area, whether it's engineering or whether it's law or medicine or another field. So you are able to see areas where innovation will make a difference. And so I think it's important to have that core knowledge about what it is that you're going to produce, or the service that you're going to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a key ingredient. The other ingredient is that really you have to sort of determine what your market is and if there really is a market for your product. That was not one of my strong points. I think the reason that I was successful, have been successful, was because of the personal relationships that I established with the personnel, the human resources managers, and the company and the companies that I worked with, so that they had a lot of confidence in my knowledge and ability, and that they were very comfortable and pleased with the level of service that we provided. And then, you have to learn how to automate certain processes. You have to figure out which parts of the business are more routine and can be delegated or can be automated. So when I first started this, there was really no cloud-based applications.
Right.
Anything.
Right.
And the first piece of specialized software that I acquired was really just a fillable form system that was just based on my computer, and it just had the forms. And immigration is driven by forms. It's a forms practice. So I could fill in the particular form, and then I could print it. That I used for about a year, and then it became very inadequate. Plus, other products came on the line that were database. They were applications utilizing databases. So not only did they have the forms, but they would also save the information for the business and for the individual, for the foreign national. And so once you put that information in, it was saved, and you could then, and it would link. Different forms would require the same types of information, so it would populate the forms based on the client, the business client, and the individual client. So that was a real benefit, and it also made the forms more consistent, so there were fewer errors. And I took a couple of risks with companies that were new, but who offered innovative products, and I worked with them to improve their products for this database, and that was a big part of what I did. So you have to be able to innovate with technology as well, and you have to have a good sense for people.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that you had a lot of connections before from your previous job.
Right.
So how do you think it would have went if you didn't have those relationships? Do you think that as someone who wants to start a business, that having pre-developed relationships before you go into a venture is a requirement for starting a business, or is it just something that you would say is helpful?
Well, it really depends on the type of business you're going to go into.
Okay.
The great boom in the last 20 years has been internet-based companies, primarily sales. But you look at the big 4 or 5. Facebook really just started in a college dorm, and it just resonated with people to be able to connect, and it grew exponentially. And we know that Amazon just started in books, and they lost money for years. So they developed, these companies developed without really having pre-existing relationships. They just built a new mousetrap, so to speak. And the technology was adapted because it was much more efficient. And so things like that are on one end of the spectrum, I think. Personal service businesses, like law, are are really built on relationships. And had I not had the existing relationships, had I tried to start from scratch with no existing clients, it would not have worked. It really wouldn't have. I had established relations with many of these people because I had worked in this company and I had done tax work related to foreign nationals. So it was almost a logical extension because I had the income tax knowledge. I understood a lot about what was involved in transferring a foreign national, everything other than the immigration part. So when I started doing this, the human resource people in the different various divisions of this company already knew me and learned that I was also now doing the immigration work. It just fell into place because I already had a relationship of trust with them, and they had confidence in my abilities and my knowledge, and they were, pleased with the level of service, which was much, much better than what they were getting from other vendors. So that was my primary advantage, I guess. My strategic advantage was the service and the existing connections and the sort of comprehensive knowledge that I had that involved not only the immigration, but the tax and also the corporate aspects of these types of transfers.
Okay.
So I was very lucky. I went from one situation where I was out of a job and reconnected with a former employer and was just able to create this business basically from scratch and with really not a whole lot of knowledge of the technical subject matter that I was dealing with. But fortunately, I learned it.
Do you think that you were a special case, or do you think that it's possible to do that, to plan on doing that, to not know everything there is to know about a certain business and go for it anyway? I mean,
yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, it is, and I think it's important because you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, which is one of those mantras. But it means that once you have a workable product, you need to get it out there. Once you have a service, you start doing it, and you may make mistakes, but you're going to learn and you're going to build and you're going to safeguard against those happening again. So gradually, you build, a better product and a better service. The problem, I guess, in some part is that this practice of immigration has become more of a commodity. Well, that's not directly to your question. Would others be able to do this? Other companies, other law firms have done more and more online stuff, and that is aided by the software applications now, which are cloud-based and allow your clients, the business, and the individual to access and to put in their data directly. So that's taken a step out, which you don't need as many paralegals or data entry people because the client can put it in directly. So some firms have gone almost basically as online practitioners of law. Their level of service is minimal, so I don't compete with them directly. But it has commoditized the business to a degree. And the distinguishing factor that I've always strived to offer is that additional customer service and that broader base of knowledge about the whole area of transferring foreign nationals.
Great.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I've got everything that I need. I learned a lot from this interview. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye now, Alex.